record this because a lot of people will miss the event. So I just want to make sure I'm recording. So, and then Bill's a great guy. If you ever got any questions, you can reach out to him. We'll probably have him come in and present one of these days. It's been a while. Also, Steve Olson over at Fourplex Investment Group. If you're looking to do, they only do fourplexes, only new construction, only in high growth A, B plus neighborhoods. So typically what happens is you get in on the ground floor of these opportunities with them. And by the time you're done with the construction, the properties typically have gone up in value. So there's built-in equity by the time they're done. But they only do fourplexes in places like Idaho, Salt Lake City, just outside of Houston, and now in Phoenix, Arizona. So if you're looking for a type of properties, reach out to Steve Olson. And then, of course, you're going to hear from Hemlane. Dana is my friend and the CEO of Hemlane. We've known each other for a long time. So thank you, Dana, for all your support, all the education that you provide our members, and all the amazing stuff that you do, and the startup and the family life and all those amazing things that you do. So, and then Ria is also our sponsor. If you're ever looking for deals in Alameda County or anywhere in the Bay Area, Ria's in the know. She knows where the deals are. She was on our Deal of the Week podcast last week. She does a very thorough job. So if you're ever looking to sell, buy, find deals off market, whatever, do reach out to Ria. And for mortgages, of course, a lot of you know Alexandra. She does conventional, all kinds of, if you have a challenging mortgage situation, she is really talented with figuring out. She knows what the lenders are looking for. She'll work with you if you have a slightly challenging loan situation. And then, of course, Oleg is also with Farmers, but he's also representing a bunch of other insurance agencies. So you can reach out to Oleg as well. If you need a copy of this presentation, reach out to me as well. And then Kamal, just an amazing guy. He normally does brand new construction. He focuses on high-end, ground-up construction. So if you got those types of complex projects, he'll do them anywhere in the Bay Area except San Francisco. But he's great. And this is his email and his phone number. He's actually presented to our group. I think last time Dana and Kamal presented in Oakland and San Francisco, we had a packed room, I remember. And then Skylight is our new latest sponsor. They're also a general contractor, and they use technology in ways that it's unheard of in the construction space. They just raised $14 million from VCs because they've got something special that they're working on. They're going to be presenting on June 24th, I believe. So look for that event. It's going to be a very eye-opening event on how to estimate your rehabs. So Josh, great guy. And then actually we have another sponsor I forgot to add, but they're called Habitat ADU. They only focus on ADUs in the Bay Area. And with everything that's going on with shelter in place, they're actually got some really unique propositions. So if you're looking into ADUs, reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with Eric Preston over at Habitat ADU. So anyway, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dana. Dana is just an amazing person. And if you ever get a chance to, meet her in San Francisco or whatever, maybe on one of her webinars, just get to know what they're doing. It's really, property management is always one of the most frustrating parts of being a landlord. And what they've done is they've done some amazing things to help landlords, especially remote landlords. So with that, Dana, thank you for making the time and for always, sharing some really valuable information with our members, our meetup members. So thank you with that. And I'll keep quiet now. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Bobby. I do hope to make this collaborative. And the reason I stopped the screen share here was I actually wanted to hear a little bit from you guys before we begin. So in the chat box, if you guys can just let me know, do you own rental properties? If so, are you self-managing? Are you using a manager? And then also, if there's any specific questions that you may have during this time, thinking about your investments for the upcoming year, if you have anything to share, would love to see that into the group chat there. So if you can go ahead and toss some things in there, that would be great. I do hope this is helpful. I also want to make sure there is some time for questions at the end. One very quick thing, I am not a lawyer, so I can't provide legal advice. I get a lot of legal questions my direction. I can send you to websites to help you, but I won't be able to help with any legal questions. So do try to save those for a real estate attorney. There's some great ones in the area. Great, so it looks like some people own and self-manage, some using a, let me just go here, some using a property manager, others self-managing, and some that are a mix of each. Great. So what I'm going to share with you is 2020, what we're seeing, both macro trends that actually look, that affect the rental industry, as well as what we're just seeing in rent collection and what you can do if you think about your net operating income in the future, both from an income as well as an expense perspective. So I always like to start these, Bobby knows, with a 3-question quiz. So again, I'm going to be having you guys chat if you're not sick of typing from today. Some questions and answers. So the first one, to see what your property management knowledge is here, is can a landlord contact the applicant's therapist to confirm a companion animal accommodation letter? So in other words, you have an applicant who comes in and you say, no pets in my rental property. Can you go ahead and contact their therapist to confirm they truly need that letter? True or false? Great, thanks Charlie for saying yes and then the true. There you go. Okay, we got some in there. I'll give it a couple of more. Great. No idea. We've got some no ideas. So if I go to the next slide, how do I get to the next slide? There you go. So true, you can contact them and verify they wrote the letter. However, you cannot ask them questions like, can you tell me more about the conditions or anything like that? You can just verify that indeed they did write some sort of letter. I also have for you a list, if you're interested in therapists and verifying license numbers by states, if that is something of interest to you. The next question is, if your tenant is not paying rent, do you need to perform repairs? So your tenant puts a repair request in. We actually had one this weekend, an air conditioner went out, I believe it was in Milwaukee, and the owner said, I'm not paying this, the tenant hasn't paid rent. So please don't initiate maintenance. How should you respond, true or false? And I'm gonna, okay. So it looks like this was a bit of an easier one. Ian says, depends on the repair. Ian, can I cold call you on that one?
Yeah, sure, Dana. I guess if it's, so I invest in Minnesota. So if the repair is on a, a heater in the winter, like the answer is you need to do that no matter what. But if it's something, I guess that isn't a code violation, then that I don't think you necessarily need to act on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the answer is false. You still need to obviously do the maintenance for what we had mentioned. But as Ian had said, every single state has different rules and regulations on how long it takes to address and perform a repair. So if it's something cosmetic, you might respond and say, oh, we aren't going to fix that. That is just something cosmetic. It might be done upon the move out. So something small. But if it is something that does need to be fixed, given the guidelines of the lease, you definitely still need to do it, even if the tenant is not paying their rent. The next one is going to be an interesting one. This is my third. So the National Multifamily Housing Council comes out, they came out in April, they came out in May, and they came out in June with the percentage of tenants who did not pay rent. What was this percentage that they reported in June? 1 is 5%, 2 is 12%, 3 is 19%, 4 is 27%, and 5 is 30%. I'll wait for a couple more to come in here. No searching it online, guys. Bobby, is that what you're doing? All right. So for those of you who said 19%, you are correct, which is actually, I'll tell you a little bit more about why that might be a surprising stat and some optimism that is upcoming for the year ahead. Great. So let's go jump in what we can learn from this time. So the best thing to do is actually to look at the last recession that we had and what basically happened then. So what happened with home ownership, what happened with savings, and what we can learn from that. So after the last recession, something fell there from someone. After the last recession, we saw that there was a shift towards rentals. So for those of you who are in long-term rentals, seeing that we did have this shift for quite a couple of years, 5 years after the recession, seeing that there was a shift towards rentals and people being hesitant to jump into buying, we do believe that that could also be a trend that we see after this recession that we're having today. If I go to the next slide, savings rates also increased. So parents lost savings and money, and their children witnessed it. And so we did see after the last recession that people did start saving more, saving money. Oh, and I see one that June is not over yet. That was for rent due on the 1st and the 2nd. Apologies, meant to say that. So anyone who defaulted from the 1st and the 2nd when it was due. But savings rates increased, we saw. So that gives hope also that people are thinking more about their spending and also reserving something in their accounts. As you know, it's reported, depending on what you look at, 50 to 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. People starting to think about having a rainy day fund. And that was something that we did witness after the last recession and could potentially be something that we see in the next. Then as far as permanent losses to GDP, this is on the more negative side. What we see with COVID, so JP Morgan basically came out and said that it is estimated with COVID that there will be a permanent GDP loss. They don't know how much, 5 to 15%, somewhere around there. But looking at the trends that we saw from the last recession, what we will see from this recession, there will be some sort of GDP loss from what we saw on track in the past. Unemployment rates, though, have not dropped further. So as you guys know, it came out that we had over 14, I believe it was 14.5% unemployment that we saw between March and April, right? April, it just skyrocketed. We saw those come out. Well, the Bureau of Labor Stats just came out on June 5th with a report saying it's now at 13.3%. The unemployment rate has basically gone down now. People are starting to go back to their jobs. There is a little bit of a caveat there that the devil's in the details. Some people are saying that's actually closer to 16% because how they wrote the questionnaire, the Bureau of Labor, how it was put together and how they did the numbers, came up with the numbers, it was actually incorrect based on some people being furloughed and not being accounted for. So just so you know, they're reporting 13%, but it could be up to 16% is what they're estimating, but it is less than they predicted. With COVID, people were thinking, oh no, it's going to skyrocket to 20%. And we're not seeing that. So from that perspective, from forecast versus actuals, we're doing quite good. Unemployment benefits are higher than wages in more than 50% of the US state. That's because of the CARES Act. So $600 per week is set aside. This is federal funding. Of course, unemployment is at the state level, but this is federal funding. We're seeing $600 per week set aside in addition to give to as unemployment benefits to those who qualify for it. And then I said to be determined on the HEROES Act. Of course, we had the CARES Act at the $2 trillion. Now the House has just passed the HEROES Act. Could be they also pass, or it could get passed by Senate as well, to be determined, but that would extend the unemployment benefits from not only July 2020 all the way until January of 2021. This can definitely affect your tenants and what we're seeing rent collection and for other things related to housing and affordability. And then we remember back in April and May that they were saying 1/3 of tenants defaulted on rent payments. I'll give you an update on that. Bobby said I'm not allowed to talk about too much COVID stuff. He said people are sick of it. And so I would like to give you these updates because that kind of segues to my next topic here. But we do remember people said in the news through the roof that 1/3 of tenants defaulted on rent payments. You saw it in the Wall Street Journal, you saw it on CNN, you saw it on Fortune, you saw it on Yahoo. But of those who were late, 21% of them had always been late. They were always habitually defaulting from this study. And it was 12% of those that actually had COVID affected, that they were actually affected by COVID. 21% had just always been habitually late on rent. And that's when we give June numbers. This is as of, today. There could be adjustments and things like that going into, can a tenant pay within 30 days or are they defaulting longer than that? But this was actually back in April. And then of course we saw the stats that I just gave on the 19%. So the rates have gone down. People are paying on time, more so than they were even back in March nowadays. So we pulled our numbers as well. We saw for June, this is for rent that was due either on June 1st or June 2nd, 24.5% defaulted. So in total, 24.5% defaulted. If you compare that against some other reports, Apartment List said 30% of people defaulted for June 1st and June 2nd rent, and the National Housing Multifamily Council, they had said that rate was actually lower. So from that perspective, it was 19%. We're sort of right there in the middle. But what you will see is of those who were late, the red, this is out of 100%. What we saw is that it was actually 17% were always late on rent. They had always been late, February, March, April, May, and it had nothing to do with the economy at all. It was back when we had a healthy economy. They were always late. So the COVID effect is basically 8%. We looked at also for California. Some of you guys are in California. The numbers are fairly similar. It was a 23% defaults that we saw of tenants who were late. Some of those could be paid, right? We have 30 days for it, but it was 23% with less than 8% of on-time payments now defaulting due to COVID in May, April, or June. Does anyone have any questions on that? Kind of what we're seeing numbers wise? All right, I'll go to the next one. So 5 ways to increase net operating income. One of the important things to note, and I think Bobby's been a huge proponent of this, I have as well, is it's tenants' homes, right? And we do understand that it is a really, really difficult time for a lot of tenants. So you take everything case by case basis. But there are some things for you to consider and keep in mind as you look at, you know, should I be charging more in rent? What could I potentially charge for to make up for if I'm not doing rent increases? I think a couple of you said you have, you know, almost close to 100 units. If you're not planning to increase any of your rent payments, what are some things that you and your managers could be looking at to make it a much better situation for you as well? Also making sure that you have the money in your bank account to fund those who might be affected due to COVID. So we'll go through this. One of the things that I have said is some people have the philosophy to raise rent. I've been against that in a recession, increasing the rental prices. I think that you could have tenants move out, and that could harm you later on. But everyone, of course, has their own philosophies from that perspective. Giannis said rubs. I might ask you about that too. So pets are on the rise, so charge for them. There are some tenants who are getting pets, and you can see it right here. There was a 500% increase in foster adoption. That was reported in LA, and I believe it was also either Chicago or New York. So pets have been a source of comfort during this time. There's a lot of people working from home. We'll talk about that in a second. But what you should be considering is pet rent for those who are still employed, unaffected by COVID, because otherwise you'll just get these emotional support animals that we spoke about. And when it's an emotional support animal, you cannot charge additional rent and you cannot charge security deposits. So think about changing your mindset there and potentially being a very pet friendly place that helps people who, you know, if they're not going out, hanging out with their friends, etc., at least they do have a companion there. And if they haven't lost their job, it's a great way to look at rent increases in a different way without just blanket increasing everyone's rent. If you look at the numbers, you know, an average turnover, tenants stay between 1 to 2 years. In single family homes, they tend to actually stay for longer than if it's an apartment. Apartments have longer turnovers or more turnover. And if you have pet rent of something like $35 a month, that's $630 for the year per each one of those leases. So it's definitely something you can look at and consider. Eliminate rent myth busters. So this is the big one that Bobby said don't talk about COVID, but it is one that people have asked a lot. So I definitely wanted to bring it up. Tenants have also seen the news. We've seen the news of unemployment rates going through the roof, rent strikes, etc. Tenants don't need to pay rent if they're affected by COVID, but they still need to eventually pay it. It's just that it's a deferral payment plan. And they have to provide evidence, or in California, they don't have to provide the evidence, but they have to retain that documentation that they've actually lost a job or have healthcare expenditures from an immediate family, etc. And so from that perspective, when you look at rental payments and you know, what should be happening, if you have tenants who say we can't pay rent, just make sure that they declare it in writing, you retain that documentation, and then you put together a rent payment delay agreement. The most important thing here when you talk about your net operating income is make sure that you do have a plan for the year, where if there was an originally agreed upon plan and you need to switch it and change it to some sort of payment plan, go ahead and prepare that rent payment plan. And I put in here a link to the free California Association of Realtors document for that. But make sure you are, if you're not increasing rent, make sure you are able to collect on that rent. Unemployment benefits, as you guys have heard, some of them are delayed. Work with your tenants, make sure that you are coming up with a really, really good plan for them, and being very accommodating, but making sure that it doesn't affect you from that perspective. Any questions on that? All right. And then the moratorium, of course, keep up to date with those rules and stuff. Tenants still need to pay according to their plan. Even if you put together a document that's saying here's a deferred payment plan, there's still risk of eviction if they don't follow that plan. So make sure they do. Reduce leasing fees by taking advantage of stay-at-home orders. We've actually seen this very, very successful with our clients. So bring your vacancy rates down to 0. So right now, a lot of property managers and real estate agents are saying we won't show a property at all. And as you guys know, having vacancy is the second most costly expense. What is the most costly expense? Does anyone know? You can put it into the chat.
An eviction?
Yes, that's correct. And was that Debbie? Great job, Debbie. The most costly expense is an eviction. The other is obviously vacancy. And so with vacancy, you want to bring that down to 0. And a lot of people aren't showing properties, especially in California. If your tenant says, I need to move, or I'm not even going to be paying for this place, I'm moving somewhere else because I'm working remotely, have them host the video tours and give them something to do, some sort of showings where they're sanitizing the place, they're checking on things, etc. Give them some incentive to show the property when they're still in the unit. We've seen this done very successfully. Of course, you definitely want to have clauses and some statements about COVID and things like that, but you can bring your vacancy rate down to 0. And this is a great excuse to use tenants. You can give them a cutback too. We've even seen, hey, if you'll do this and you'll do some video tours for your tenants, for a tenant, if that tenant decides to move forward with a lease, I'll give you $200 or I'll give you $300. It's a lot less than a leasing fee. And we've seen it to become very successful with a lot of these orders and mandates in place. So you can reduce those leasing fees by essentially 50% is what we've seen. You pre-lease before obviously the rental is available. And we've also seen the current resident is incentivized to leave the place clean because they're getting some money for that. And they're already home, so they're making extra cash. A lot of them are working from home. So they're more inclined from that perspective to do it if you are going to give them a cutback on it. John said, what if the tenant will not let anyone inside due to COVID? How to sell the property? So that would also be, I don't know where your property is located, John, but it obviously is based on the lease agreement and the rules associated with, so what the lease agreement says based on the termination, as well as what your state's laws are, rules and regulations on the sale of the property. That's a little bit of a different story if you're trying to sell the property. But if you're trying to release the property, some tenants we've seen have come to us and said, no one's allowed in the property. That's fine. Have them do video tours or something where it makes them realize, wow, we can make some money because we're at home anyways, working from home, or if they're furloughed or something like that, they're at home looking for something to do there. And you yourself are able to reduce that vacancy time and make them feel like we better leave this place in a good condition. New people are coming in.
Hey, Dan, a quick question about that before we move on.
Yeah.
If a tenant does not want someone in the space, even though as a landlord you can do so with proper notification, can they still waive that? Like, do they have to let you in due to COVID, or do you know if anything's changed around that?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what the situation is. If it's an emergency, right, obviously you can still go in. But if it is something where it's like showings or something like that, they might say no, and they could reference local, every single county is different, but they could reference local ordinances saying, hey, they're saying this is not considered an essential service, right? And every single state's different, right? Every single county is also different. But they could reference that and make it where that you essentially couldn't show it. And that's why what we found is we found tenants to say, no, the real estate agent can't go in and show the property. And we've had customers come to us and we said, great, ask the tenant if you give them $300 if they'll do FaceTime showings. And once someone is, you know, fully approved, maybe one showing where they've got gloves on and a mask, and the like $300, whatever it is, and we've seen fantastic results with that. Like really, really good success where suddenly the tenant has been a lot more willing. Any other questions on that? Some of the riskiest tenants we have on our platform, ones who've said we've lost our job and we're moving back home with our parents, have actually been great success stories. They've made $500 off of a lease up or something like that, moved back home with their parents, and you have a new tenant in there who may be looking for more space or looking to move to your neighborhood because they don't have to commute anymore, whatever it may be. So you might have some really good success stories with that. And you can talk to your property managers about it too, based on what their policies are. Avoid rent reductions by highlighting commuter cost savings. We've had a lot of tenants reach out to landlords on our platform, as well as property managers and agents, saying, hey, can you reduce my rent for the renewal? I work in technology, you know, at whatever company, and I'm not going, and, you know, with COVID, I can't pay. Well, what you will see is that 34% of Americans who used to commute are now working at home as of April 1st, compared to 4%. So 4% used to work from home pre-COVID. And if anything, if they're at home more often, I don't know why they would pay less in rent, right? They should be paying more in rent. They're enjoying the space more. So I guess that argument never made sense to me. But of course, if you argue that, they might just say, you're a greedy landlord, I hate you, right? So it's all about the sales and how you show yourself. And so from that perspective, I'd recommend talking about commuter savings. You know, tenants spend $2,000 to $5,000 on transportation every single year in commuter costs, whether it's gasoline, whether it's the train, whatever it might be. And so you can really highlight that they are saving from that perspective. So tenants who do say, hey, can you reduce my rent by $200, $300 due to it? I think a lot of landlords I've spoken with who've done it before talking to me have said, oh yeah, well, there's COVID, there's ambiguity. Yes, if they lose their job, you absolutely want to potentially reduce rent, do an alternative payment plan. But as long as they still have it, you definitely want to highlight these things, that they're living there more, right? That they have, they're not commuting any longer. So don't be too scared to say, you know, here's our policy. If you've been affected 100%, if not, then we're going to go through and keep the rent at the same rate. So that has been one that has come up quite a bit on the net operating income, of people saying, shoot, now I'm seeing my income go down. And rephrase it and work with them on it from that perspective. Any questions on that? Okay, great. Maintenance and inspections also got easier, and I should say repairs. But the fifth one here is inspections at zero cost. Your tenants are at home. Have them log photos and upload them into your property management system with timestamps. Have them list some repairs and some minor things they might be able to do if there's no liability there, because they're at home. People have more time to do those things. So really use this as a time to understand with the property what maintenance needs to be done, what could we do now, and what should we put onto the list for the future. But you could do inspections at a zero cost by just having everyone send photos, let them know that you can't send someone out to do those inspections, whether it's one of the property managers or someone who works on the property management team. Have them log those photos and provide a list to you. and then you're not spending that money on sending someone out for those evictions, or evictions inspections, but you have everything documented. Minor repairs can be done by residents. We've seen a lot of residents. I'm sure you guys have seen it, like Home Depot. There's just so many people there every weekend. And it's probably due to people at home and thinking of their home repairs. So things that are obviously not going to be a hazard, and something that would reduce your service call rates is definitely something you can work with them on, send them videos how to do it. Make sure you guys are working together from that perspective. And that's definitely going to reduce your service call rates. And then emergencies, people always ask me about what's considered an emergency. I do have a link here with guidelines for that, of how to reduce emergency calls. We get them all the time where it's a weekend rate or an evening rate, and people just jump to sending someone out for a service call. Those service calls are usually twice the price. And so you definitely want to make sure that you are reducing when you're sending, reducing the frequency of sending people out for emergencies. Any other questions on that? Yana, I think you got an A+, you had turnovers there. What were you thinking with rubs for potential things that you can do to improve your NOI?
Oh, well, I heard you ask the question, what are some things you can do to improve NOI? And I just put it in the chat because I thought that's what you were expecting people to do.
Oh, okay. Okay. But did you want to elaborate on that one?
I mean, I think it's a good strategy if you can take a look and see if that makes more sense for you, depending on, I guess, how many units and what the usage is and what region you're in, what the utility bills are. But if, I've seen people utilize that as a way to reduce their cost.
Yep. No, absolutely. Couldn't agree more on that. And especially with duplexes, people ask that question a lot. There's sub-metering too that you can do to actually just pass it off to the tenants and not have that administration. Depends on what size properties you have, but RUBS are definitely a great thing for you to implement.
I would agree.
Great. So resources for you, just really quickly, I know I'm at time here, but leasing, so we have marketing and tenant placement tools. We do have a 30-day free trial, so check it out. We'll advertise out your rental property. Zillow is now charging in California as of May 30th for rentals. So we will list out to there, but other websites as well. We have property listing pages, online applications, everything else to help you. We have local real estate agents, so a network of agents who are on Hem Lane to help with showings, turnovers, setting the rental price. So if you're looking for rental rates, all of that, we basically have folks who are licensed, specializing in leasing or management. Some do both. If they do, it's usually leasing only, or they do both leasing and management, but agents to help you with your rental properties when you need them. Online rent collection, everything to track documentation, especially if you need to track maintenance requests, etc. We have all of that built in. And then finally, maintenance coordination. So a 24/7 maintenance team that helps troubleshoot requests, initiate service professionals, close out their requests. They also do the invoicing and the payments for you. So all of your financials are tracked. So when you look at Hem Lane, it's an all-in-one solution. It's a flexible solution to property management. It's something between do-it-yourself and full service. For those who 70% of people self-manage their properties. So for a lot of them, they're looking for something where they still have that control, but they also get transparency with it. And so they don't have to do as much of the administration, but they still have that control and transparency for their rental properties. So if you do have any questions on Hem Lane, do reach out to me. If you have also just anything related to property management, we usually have some resources out there available, forms, documents, etc., that I'm happy to share with you. We got a question, what areas are you serviced and what are your typical fees? We are nationwide. If you do have a rental property in a city, usually under 100,000 people in the town, like the town or city, it might be more difficult. Our real estate agent network is going to be much smaller. But we are a nationwide company. The software obviously works everywhere. And then we have a list of cities. Usually if it's over 100,000 in population, we'll have an agent there. And then our fee is, if you're just on a monthly package, which is the more expensive, just to go month to month, it's $69 a month for your first rental, and then $35 per month per additional rental. That includes the 24/7 maintenance coordination. If you just want our software, it's $2.50 per unit, starting at $36. So there's two different packages there, and happy to go through that pricing with you. Bobby, questions?
Yeah, folks, if you have questions, if you don't mind, just put it in the chat, in the Q&A or in the chat button. And then, you know, first of all, thank you, Dana. Wonderful. I actually learned a few things about, you know, some of the issues that are, you know, that we're facing and tenants are facing as well. We're all in this together. So thank you for the great education. Folks, if you have, you know, let's say situations that you're encountering related to property management, Dana is an expert. She knows what she's talking about. She lives and breathes this stuff every day. So feel free to chat. Find the chat button at the bottom of your screen, in the middle of the little menu bar, and just ask away. Otherwise, we'll, there we go. So let's see, we'll give them a couple of seconds, but, or if you think of other questions, don't, you know, come back. Maybe we'll have another Q&A at the end, but you can save them for later. But we do have two presenters today. So I do want to tee it up for Marc. Marc, let me make you a co-host. Thanks for joining. All right, Marc, you are also a co-host now. So there you go, Marc. Great, good to see you. Good to see you.
Nice
all
to see
right,
you.
all right. So, folks, again, I've known Marc for over a year now, and maybe longer. Thanks to my common friends Svetlana and Lesya for introducing me to Marc. Marc's out of Southern California, I think. Still Southern California, right?
I am in Southern California right now.
All right, beautiful, beautiful Southern California. So, but Marc is really just an amazing person, a wealth of knowledge when it comes to real estate, syndications, opportunity zones, new development, apartments, you know, turning around neighborhoods in San Diego, and in many other places. But the reason why we have him here today to focus on is opportunity zone, and then how to analyze opportunities in this COVID environment. You know, so Marc is really truly an expert on opportunity zones. So please, you know, thank you, Marc. Thanks for coming. I'll turn it over to you. You can do a desktop share or whatever share you are comfortable with, and we'll get started. And then, folks, if you don't mind, just keep you know, plugging your questions into the chat box. We'll open it up later for more Q&A. Thank you, Marc.
Thanks, Bobby.
Yours.
Can you guys see my screen or no?
Not yet, but
Not
click.
yet.
There's a green share screen button.
1 second.
In case you have two monitors, it'll prompt you which monitor you want to share. But usually, let me make sure I do have you as a, yeah, you're a co. Do you see a green share screen button at the bottom of your menu bar?
Just a second. It minimized when I brought open the presentation on my side. So just a second. All right.
Funny.
How about now?
Yes.
Got it?
Yep, there it is. Beautiful. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, everybody, thanks for coming and spending time. I wish we were in person doing this, but times being what they are, I'm looking forward to chatting with you guys tonight about not only opportunity zones, because I think that they're more prominent than ever, factoring not only COVID, but you know, the rest of the other things that have been happening post-COVID in our country that would point to, you know, investing in these areas as being a smart decision. And then I also want to kind of focus on telling you a little bit about like the kind of projects that we do at CoPlace, and then I'm going to dive into strategies that you can use in your business that are data-driven. They're going to help you succeed in, you know, this new reality we have in real estate. So let me first kind of go on by telling you a little bit about what we do at CoPlace. So I'm a founder of several businesses and advisors from startups and things like that. I've been doing real estate with my partners for about 20 years. And so there's two businesses I'm going to talk to you tonight about, which is CoPlace and then our predictive analytics and data analysis business, which is called Ideal Target, which is something that we use as a competitive advantage at CoPlace. So what we do at CoPlace is we build equitable, socially responsible, culturally valuable, environmentally conscious, and economically sustainable projects. So that's a mouthful. What it really means is we take an inside-out approach to developing neighborhoods and investing long-term in real estate. So just to give you an idea of what our background is, so that you can get a feel for whether or not we have something worth chatting about here. So like I said, we've been doing stuff for about 20 years. We have a private money business as well. We've lent out about $120 million in the last 12 years of our own money to flippers and apartment owners and repositioners and things like that. We've developed about $500 million in real estate. Our lending business was the fastest growing business in San Diego. And we currently have about $200 million in assets throughout California and a pipeline of several hundred million more in California and Georgia and Texas. So we do pretty well by our investors while doing these projects. And we've been investing in what are now called opportunity zones for quite some time, long before they were called opportunity zones. So quickly, before I get going on this, raise your hand or put it in the chat box. How many of you actually know what opportunity zones are or what the opportunity zone program is? Okay, so a few of you. So I'll just take a couple minutes and give you the broad strokes about it. So it was a piece of legislation passed in the 2017 Trump tax bill. And it's actually, besides the fact that it was passed with this administration, it's actually one of the most widely bipartisan supported pieces of legislation in the past half a century. So it got its start in the George W. administration rather, and then was worked on heavily in the Obama administration, and then was finally passed in the current administration. So what it is the largest federal incentive for private investment that's ever existed. Now there's a catch to it, and it's to incentivize investors with capital gains dollars to invest their funds for a significant amount of time into what are called opportunity zones, which are traditionally known as like low income areas. If you do this and you keep your investment in these areas for 5 years, you get a 5% step up in basis. And if you keep them in there for 10 years, you get a 10% step up in basis. So what that would mean is if you had $1 million in gain, you would be able to, one, defer that gain, which would typically be due at the time of sale, for 5 or 10 years. And then at that 5 or 10 year point, which actually the tax bill is due in 2027, so about 7 years at this point, you would be able to reduce the amount owed. So rather than paying capital gains on $1 million, you pay capital gains on 900,000. And so what the real kicker of the program is that any investment that you make with those dollars into an opportunity zone fund or an opportunity zone business, all of the profits that you generate from that over the course of that investment are completely tax-free. So that's a pretty big deal. And so now, why are opportunity zones important to investors? You know, there's several reasons, and I can break them down into these four, right? So accessibility. There's never been another time where there has been access to such a large amount of capital from investors who have either sold real estate or sold stocks. And outside of a couple of ways that one could do this, if they were investing in startups or something, if you sell stocks and have a gain, there really is no mechanism outside of an opportunity zone investment to shield that from gain. So it increases the accessibility of capital. It also increases the flow of capital. So there's a lot of investors out there. So think about this, whether it's you who's investing or whoever you're uplegging properties to, right? They might be an opportunity zone investor even if you're not, right? There's going to be more money flooding into these areas. It's additionally a driver of demand. So this is a tax efficient investment, which means people are interested in it. And there's a lot of businesses that will be moving, you know, even post-COVID, even these hubs and more distributed business styles, they're going to be a lot of times located in opportunity zones. There's a lot of businesses that are going to be locating specifically in opportunity zones for those tax benefits. So to take it out of the real estate side of things for a second and use businesses as an example, you could start the next Facebook in a building in an opportunity zone and then take it public 8 years later and the billions of dollars in profit that you made is tax-free. So it's a pretty strong driver of folks wanting to be in these areas. And then most importantly, I would say is that there's a limited supply and there's barriers to entry, right? So a lot of folks are not going to come to these areas because traditionally they're, you know, underserved communities, which would scare off a lot of investors, especially the larger money investors. Now, in addition to that, there's only 8,700 or so total census tracts that have been designated as opportunity zones across the whole country. There's hundreds of thousands of census tracts across this country, and only 8,700 of them are capable of providing an investor with these kinds of tax-efficient investment opportunities. Now, there are some pitfalls with this program, and I would say that these pitfalls are actually your opportunity. And one of those is place-based risk. And what that, again, is kind of what I just said, which is typically most investors, especially larger money investors, are going to want to focus their money in Class A neighborhoods and Class A assets. That's not what opportunity zones are by definition. That being said, there are many opportunity zones that are in the path of gentrification that are, you know, very nearby, very nice areas. You know, a strange example is in the census tract where Stanford University is technically an opportunity zone. So, you know, there's that place-based risk. Additionally, there's some compliance issues which lead to entitlement risk, which would mean most investors are only going to want to buy shovel-ready projects. So think about that if you're, you know, a flipper or you buy apartment buildings or something like that and you have a large lot, you might be able to entitle that for a buildable project, but you're not the kind of investor who wants to build something. You could take a little bit of extra investment dollars and entitle that property, and there's a ton of opportunity zone investors that'll be ready to pick that up from you because they don't want to take that risk of entitling it for that new use or the additional units or whatever the case is. Again, because there's a limited supply of these areas, there's inflated pricing. So across the country, real estate in opportunity zones commands a 5 to 25% premium on other real estate within that city. Compliance issues is just something that funds have to deal with. There's a lot of extra stuff involved with running an opportunity zone fund than a standard fund from a compliance perspective. So it keeps a lot of folks out of the space and or not managing properly. There's also a long investment timeline, right? So we talked about 5 and 10-year time horizons. A lot of folks want to be in and out of investments a lot sooner. But if you're a long-term hold investor, there couldn't be a better opportunity for you than to start investing in buying multifamily and opportunity zones, because if you're going to keep it for a long time anyways, you know, this is a tailor-made program for you. But again, most investors are looking for a 5 to 7 year exit, and 10 years is quite a long time. In this whole industry, this is a new program that really, you know, just really came into full legislative, you know, regulatory capabilities like a year ago. So there's a lack of credibility on all managers. So a lot of money is, you know, slow to act, or it's going to manage itself and make its own investments or invest in individual projects as opposed to larger funds. And then there's just the availability of capital. So currently, as it stands, only capital gains can invest in opportunity zones. But the silver lining of this whole COVID crisis is that actually there's been a lot of movement in the opportunity zone space as it relates to compliance and then other changes to the program, because not only, we kind of have two large national stories right now going on that relate to opportunity zones. One, neighborhoods of color were more disproportionately affected by COVID, right? Those are opportunity zones. And then with all of the other things going on with equality and things like that, I mean, these are the areas that deserve the most investment and where the biggest difference can be made. Those are all the opportunity zones. And so with that, there is a letter into Congress to actually allow all types of capital to take advantage of all of these really great tax incentives and to invest in opportunity zones. Now that's not finalized yet and hasn't been passed, but we're in a new world as it is, and it couldn't be a better time to widen that program. So I feel pretty confident about it as far as positive changes being made to the Opportunity Zone program going forward. Now, I'll just tell you a little bit about what CoPlace does and how we look at projects a little differently. And I encourage other investors to look at opportunity zone investing either, from two perspectives. One, if you're looking to be an opportunity zone fund to yourself or invest in opportunity zone funds, that's one thing. You want to think holistically about things. And additionally, if you're an investor looking to, invest your own funds as opportunity zone funds into these areas, or just as opportunistic funds that you then sell to other investors because of those other reasons, right? Because they're commanding higher prices, because there's a higher interest in investing in these areas because of the tax incentives, et cetera, right? So what we do is we get early market access. So we look to opportunity zones in blighted communities and just outside of gentrified areas. And a good example of that is in San Diego, where our projects we're working on right now are, about 3/4 of a mile away from us. The dirt sells for between $500 and $600 a square foot. And where our project is, again, 3/4 of a mile away, we're buying it at $100 a square foot. So we can get into the market early because there's not comps, right? Because these are historically disinvested areas. And so we don't have the luxury of having great comps, and so it's harder to get financing and all those other kinds of things. That allows us, like I said, to get better pricing. Now we have a strategy, which I'll tell you a little bit about in a second, which is that we activate the community around it in a holistic way so that we can actively have an impact on increasing the value of the dirt in that neighborhood, which we call positive externalities. Which that would say, because we did this, the properties around us received that, right? So we're not just looking to create impact in the project that we do, we're looking to create an activation that increases the value of the dirt surrounding us, thus making it an attractive area for others to invest in to help build our own comps and create the pricing we want to go up. And so all of this together allows us to kind of mitigate that place-based risk, right? Because we're taking an active role, not just buying a piece of property and developing it. We're taking an active role with the community and ensuring that project is successful. Now, our methodology on how we do that is pretty simple, actually. It's three main prongs, and what I'm going to start talking about in a minute is this stuff, which is the big data insights. And so what we do is we cross-reference a ton of different data sets and look at all kinds of standard and non-standard things to identify really interesting analytics around an area, whether that's business gap analysis or traffic counts or mobile device behavior, search engine behavior, things like that. Then we go get boots on the ground analysis and community assessment and hear from the people on the streets about what they want, and we ensure that that's in line with what the city's overall plans are. So pretty simple. And so how we find our deals in opportunity zones or elsewhere is we use, which I'll talk about in a moment, is our other company, which is a predictive analytics and data analysis company called Ideal Target. And what we have done is we have a curated list of over 10,000 different data sets, and we categorize them by like 100 plus different indicators that track everything from financial need to behavioral intent. And then we model that with AI and machine learning and a bunch of other cool stuff. And we pop out interesting information. And on the commercial side, that allows us to decide what kind of tenants are best to put in a given area, what kind of uses are best to be used in a given area, how can we create different kinds of traffic demands. And then on an individual, single family, multifamily investment perspective, it allows us to identify individual owners of property and identify certain behavioral and life event and other types of data around who in a specific area, like say we identify a specific opportunity zone we want to work in and a specific block we want to work in, we can then drill down even further. And is what Ideal Target's really good at doing is identifying the property owners within that set who have a history and active financial distress happening in their life from a variety of, again, standard and non-standard indicators. And then that's who we reach out to, and that allows us to get better pricing on deals. And it allows us from a marketing perspective to really target down where our budget is being spent as far as the cost of every new deal that comes in the pipeline, right? Which is, how much money do we have to spend to get somebody to call us back? And if we can use, really targeted data to get in front of the people who we know, one, are going to be making a decision pretty soon, and two, are more likely to be interested in negotiating, that's beneficial to us. So this is kind of a look at what one of our co-place projects would look like, right? So on the left there, that's an actual deal we're doing right now. It's a vacant block, the city block, 7,000 square foot warehouse on the left-hand side there. That's what we're buying it as. Within a year, we will do what we call a temporary activation, all that stuff in the middle there, and on the right, that's all made out of shipping containers. It's a 21-unit apartment building on the right. Sports arena for local sports like futsal, and then also for open air markets and a variety of things like that with bleachers, etc. And then all of this here in the center is different retail, food, children and family areas, both self-serve and paid. So, and then while we're entitling that and taking our time and increasing the value of the dirt of the neighborhood, we entitle it for what's the maximum use there and what's the highest benefit and most equitable to the community. And on this site right here, what that looks like is an ultimate build of about 300 micro units on top of ground floor retail, right? So to give you an idea of what that looks like, we're buying this thing over here at about $3.5 million bucks. And once we've entitled this and are ready to sell it off to a developer or JV with a builder to build it out within our fund, this is a $80, $90 million project. And the way we do that is, you saw that activation in the middle, is we have a program where we incubate local artisanal and creative businesses because our goal is to really showcase the culture of a neighborhood. So we start with a program where businesses can come in and work in a pop-up, and then if they're successful, they can get short-term occupancy in half a shipping container, which is about 150 square feet. And then if they continue to do well, we can move up the commitment and they can get 350 square feet in a whole container, and with the eventual goal of them moving out of our project and getting onto Main Street. And so what's interesting, actually, to take a quick side note on how COVID has affected this model, we've actually seen, interestingly enough, this working in both directions. So the tenants at some of our new projects, the ones who are reaching out to us now, are actually folks who had those long-term leases on Main Street. And for whatever reason, whether it was being shut down for 3 months or being ready to open and then getting completely destroyed and looted, they can't afford to have the Main Street anymore. So they're wanting to move down to pop-up. They're wanting to move into a half container. They're wanting to do those kinds of things. And so we really think that some interesting things are headed our way once we're able to start going back out and this new way of spending time in a communal environment looks. And so we're really excited about seeing, better access to more interesting options, right? So a friend of mine actually told me about something interesting down here in LA a couple of weeks ago, which is there's this really, really amazing restaurant called Fred's Laundry, which is this world famous chef called Thomas Keller. And he did an 11-course tasting menu in to-go containers for 110 bucks. Like, that is something that would be unattainable to most people. And yeah, granted, it's expensive, but imagine being able to go to a place and Thomas Keller and his team have a pop-up and you're able to get access to food that you never would have been able to get access to because, you know, they had this dining room and they had to handle all that stuff. So there is some definite silver linings in what's likely to be the new way retail and restaurants and communal activities happen post-COVID.
Hey, Mark,
so,
quick question.
Yeah.
On that slide, how long is the entitlement process for you guys typically in that interim strategy? Do you guys have long-term leases in place? I saw 1-year occupancy. Is that about the max?
Yeah, so actually within our leases, I didn't want to dive too much into the weeds on it, but what's actually interesting is we actually don't do leases. So I use that terminology just because it's easier to understand for most people, but if you're involved in commercial, I would encourage you to take a look at this a little bit more. If you're involved in residential, it doesn't really apply to you. But in the, like, self-storage as an example, when you go rent a self-storage unit, you don't have a leasehold interest, you have a license. You have a license to utilize that space for a certain type of thing for a certain period of time. And so that's what we actually do with our tenants. We provide a turnkey space for them. And they come in and they can operate that, whether that's on a shift basis or on a day-to-day basis or a month-to-month basis, so with no long-term commitments. And so typically the activation, so we will take our time to entitle opportunity zone projects because we have the time to do it. And so we would typically have the activation. It takes between 12 and 18 months from the time we close on a property to be able to have something built. But as an example, that project I just showing on that last slide, we're due to close in July. And since the apartment units are already built and sitting in the factory in Carson in LA, as soon as we close in July, we have our permits essentially done for the build on that. So all we have to do is the site work, which take about 6 months, and then install these 21 units that are all fully ready to go and furnished. So we get, you know, from the time we close to actively having those units occupied by people, be it 8 months. So that's pretty interesting. So typically our projects have a shorter time frame to get built because we use a lot of modular construction, and there's reasons you can get into for that, which is essentially if you use modular, there's benefits because you can get accelerated depreciation. You could move those units, which we've done before, and you could get accelerated depreciation again on the next project you use those units at, because they're, from a tax perspective, it's a new use. It also allows you to get, you know, through a permitting process very, very quickly with a city. And that interim use is typically anywhere between 2 and 5 years. And then somewhere around year 7 is when we'll look to have the entitlements fully wrapped up. But that being said, a lot of the stuff that we're doing is, you know, we have a lot of that place, that the entitlement stuff we get done in earlier on. We just don't move forward with it, if that makes sense, until once the activation has taken hold, because the goal is this is those positive externalities, right? And so this is a project we did in San Diego. It's called Courtyard. So we did that project starting we opened the doors in 2015. And you see, before we opened the doors, these are some of the sales that were around the project, right, in the last couple of years. So they sold for, you know, around 100, 150 bucks a square foot. After we came into that neighborhood and we did our activation, for 2 years, you can see the change in pricing between 15 and 18. The price is averages between $400 and $600 a square foot. And now you can't buy anything in that neighborhood for under $650 a square foot. And so that's what the purpose of that activation is, really, right? So the longer we can let that activation go, actually, the better, because the more there is in the dirt, because more investors get, you know, excited about the fact that this area is going to be something new, right? So the apartment complex, this 21 apartments I'm talking about, it's the first shipping container apartments in the whole county of San Diego. So that's going to have a buzz about it just in and of itself, right? And so other developers and other investors are going to want to come invest in the neighborhoods around that. And then when we open the activation, you know, several months later, and there's this really cool stuff to do, and there's people doing things there, and there's commerce, and there's traffic, and there's all these things happening, you know, more and more investors start doing more and more activity, inherently increases the value of everything, right? And so let's move into the kind of how you can find these kind of things, right? Because if you're interested in co-play stuff, you know, feel free to check out our website or reach out to me afterwards. I'm happy to share stuff about that and go into all kinds of depth with you on that. But outside of, you know, investing in our funds or getting some ideas from us, that's less actionable for you. Whereas information about Ideal Target is very actionable for the individual investors, right? Because I strongly believe that a data-driven approach to investing is every single time going to yield you higher profits and better margins, right? Whether that's decreasing your budget for marketing, increasing your conversion rates, or just frankly giving you better margins on your deals because you're dealing with people in different sort of situations that you know are more interested in negotiating. So I'll tell you a little bit about what that is and how you know, you can use it in your business. So what we do is we can identify areas, so territories, and we can go within those territories. We cross-reference them against, you know, hundreds of different factors to identify an area and score it based off of whether that's an area you should avoid if you're a flipper or a wholesaler, whether that's an area where you should do a what we call a prehab, or, you know, what's a rent ready kind of flip, or multifamily rental or long-term rental play, or if it's a rehab area, which means that there's a higher demand, there's a higher importance on, you know, more expensive items and things like that. And so those are the areas we want to go like all out on. And then there's areas that we label as wholesale, which are maybe areas that, you know, you can get a nice margin on, but maybe you don't want to get stuck in it unless you know what you're doing as far as managing it, whether that's a high crime area or the things like that. And those kind of can give you an idea of where to place, you know, marketing dollars and where you should target for a given area that you're interested in going to. And then what we do from that is we track, like I said, about 10,000 different data sets on a daily basis, and we cross-reference them against each other over time, and we can get a long-term picture of what's happening in an individual owner's life. And so what we track primarily are financial distress attributes and those indicators thereof, right? So some of those things are pretty traditional, you know, standard things like life events and demographics and things like that, but then the other things get a little bit more nuanced, which I'll get into from there. And then we can, which is a secondary part of what we do, is we also provide some automated marketing tools that investors can use to communicate by phone, email, and direct mail with their potential clients. And so what we can do here with Ideal Target in your business is, if you're a flipper, let's just kind of get a frame of thinking around things. One, if you're in real estate right now, in opportunity zones are areas that would be worth targeting for so many different reasons, right? So think about our opportunity zones. Secondarily, if you're a flipper right now and you're not well capitalized, be extremely careful. All the numbers that are out, all of the analysis that's out, barring some, is very much interested in creating a market that doesn't tank, right? And so there's a lot of things that aren't being factored. The real estate markets are definitely going to be lagging behind. You know, to give some idea about that, the private equity is growing and raising money for a lot of really big debt funds, you know, billions of dollars for distressed debt funds. And they're telling their investors that they don't plan on deploying any of that money for 18 to 24 months. So that gives you an idea of what the smart debt investors are thinking about this economy. So what we're seeing right now is you know, maybe some glimmers of hope out of what might have been a very dismal thing. That's not to say it's not quite dismal and that it's not going to be quite a bumpy road for a long time. So if you're not a well-capitalized flipper, I strongly would encourage you to focus more on wholesaling, get in and out of that business. If you're a well-capitalized flipper, also be careful. But think more about doing more value add, right? Be more intelligent with the places that you invest, be more focused on getting a larger margin, be more focused on your budget, think about doing rentals, think about adding units, think about doing ADUs, you know, get more focused on the data side of your business so that you can make better decisions, so that you can have a much more guaranteed, if that's ever a term in investing, right? A much more higher likelihood of seeing a positive return, right? So just going in and buying a property and having 20% margin available on it and doing a cheap flip in 6 months is, you know, while I'm seeing it happen, and I have plenty of people who are doing flips right now and being successful at it, you can get caught pretty easy in a volatile market. So be able to be flexible, be able to, you know, look at doing long-term rentals, look at doing, you know, lease to own with tenants, look to doing, you know, various other kinds of subject to purchases, right? So if you're not a well-capitalized investor, you know, identify people with financing that you could do a subject to on, right? And you could take over their mortgage. Essentially, it's no money down. And, you know, you got to be smart about how you do these kind of things. But there are ways to get into properties now, and you just got to be mindful about the kind of returns to expect, and to be a lot more critical about the analysis of data. So some of the different points that we're looking at that you know, I encourage others to look at, whether you do it through us or you do it on your own, is, you know, we're looking at things like growth potential, spending trends, labor market, supply and demand models, right? Then demographics and psychographics, economic data, vehicle traffic, points of interest, you know, competition for certain types of things, mobile device activity, social media consent around certain things, search engine activity around certain things, right? So I encourage you to get, you know, super deep into the kinds of things that you're looking at. And we can do that very locally to the, you know, to the zip code level. And again, like I said, we have, you know, over 10,000 data sets that we're looking at every day. So some of those different data sets that we're looking at are these, right? So everything from a notice of default and trustee sale to death of joint tenants, MLS listings, private listings, code violations, you know, lifestyle stuff, transportation, business investments, labor supply, trip originations, you know, transit, entertainment, right? And the list goes on and on and on. And this is just a handful of the kind of things that we're looking at. You know, we get even into interesting online behavior, right? So are people spending too much time on gambling websites? Are they, you know, applying for credit cards and getting declined? Are they trying to take out auto title loans and high interest personal loans and things like that, right? So that's kind of the stuff that I encourage you to either look at or work with us to look at. So what's interesting, you know, about what we do at Ideal Target is that we don't necessarily have any data that's not data that somebody else could purchase. Some of the data sets are harder to get to because you have to have certain size requirements and various different things like that, but it's not like this is some special secret data that nobody has. What's special about it is the processing of the data and the fact that we look at these things over time, and then we cross-correlate a whole bunch of, you know, very disparate pieces of information to create a whole picture of somebody over time, to identify one, level of financial distress, and then two, velocity to make a decision, right? So if a person has a notice of default, there's a 38% likelihood that they're gonna, or I'm sorry, there's a 54% likelihood they're gonna sell their home within 12 months of a notice of default. If they file for divorce, it's 38% likelihood they're gonna sell their home within 12 months, right? So that's a pretty strong indicator. Well, what if that person who has the notice of default is also spending a ton of time on a gambling site, which is a high risk behavior? They're applying for credit cards and getting declined. And they're behind on their property taxes, right? The velocity that person is going to make the decision becomes sooner, because if a person owns property and they're having financial distress, first they're going to go and look to their personal assets to try to get access to money, whether that's credit cards or their car or personal loans or whatever the case is. And once they exhaust those options, it's the home, right? So there's only really three things they're going to do. They're either going to list their home through a realtor or other way, right? They're going to sell to an investor or get foreclosed, or an iBuyer or something like that. They're going to sell off market or what have you. And the third option is they're going to refinance. Those are the three choices. And so we found that in our data, the folks who show up in our data sets who have 2 or more active, what we call indicators at one time, that 22% of them list, refinance, or have already sold within 6 months. And within 18 months, it's closer to 70%. And I've heard different numbers from clients in different areas, but these are pretty conservative numbers. And in addition to that, the thing I want to definitely make sure I make clear to anybody, whether you market for yourselves or use somebody to market for you, the fortune is in the follow-up. I'm sure you guys have heard this in places before. 77% of people who were on our list who had 2 or more indicators at one time, if 8 to 12 touches, right? If we kept following up with them 8 to 12 times, they would convert to a sale. So to translate that to your business, whether it's flipping or it's rentals or whatever it is that you're marketing to get your deals, continue to follow up with them, because 80% of your deals are going to close at the 8th to the 12th touch. Most people are going to stop after 4, so I'll take that with you for what it's worth. So this is an example of like what our seller data looks like. And this is like a daily feed, and you can see it goes through and it has the seller's name, and it has the address, and it has the mailing address and all that kind of stuff. And it also has the category, right? So you see how they're color coded, and it's like wholesale zones and avoid zones and rehab zones and all that. And then you can see it'll have a file called files, and in there it tells you what's going on with this person over time. And as you can see, this number 4 ranking here, right? So they filed for bankruptcy in May. They had a notice of sale in May. They had default on their taxes in 2018, and they had a notice of default in January of the year before, or I'm sorry, of the same year. So that person is selling that property or refinancing that with probably based off of those indicators. They're not refinancing that property because that option's gone, right? They don't have the credit for that, and likely not the equity. So they're selling, and the thing that is interesting to see about that is those 4 different things that are happening in that person's life. That's like the average investor. You buy a marketing list and you target a list of people and you send them direct mail. You market to them on Facebook or send phone calls or whatever the case is. Well, you're sending it to one list, right? So the big thing I want you to get out of this is we have 10,000 plus lists, and then we cross-correlate them over time and then put that into one list for our clients, right? So instead of marketing to one list, like a bankruptcy list, you wouldn't know, let's say there's 1,000 people who filed for bankruptcy. You wouldn't know that this guy, let's call him Joe Smith here at the top of the board here. I mean, that's the guy who you should go park in front of his house, right? If you have 1,000 people on a bankruptcy list, 999 of them don't matter, but Joe Smith here does matter because something's going on with him. And so it's just a better way, a smarter way to make decisions about who you target, and then your conversion rates, go through the roof because you're only targeting people who whether they've told you or not, that they're going to be making an activity on that property. And if you get to them first, and you stay in front of them often, your likelihood of converting that person is quite high. And so I want to kind of tie these 2 things back together, right? So from a co-place perspective and an ideal target perspective, this is a map of an area that we work in San Diego. Now in the green, those are all properties that we own from a co-place. These are all co-place activation sites. The one that's in the rectangle there in the center is the one that I just showed you a few slides ago, right? Now, all the ones in yellow, those are all lending opportunities for people that ideal target society that would be good opportunities for us to offer private money loans to. The light orange stuff, that's arbitrage deals. Those are deals that we know that we can buy, as a single family, for instance, that we can add units to because they have, a mismatch in zoning or something like that. We can add an ADU to, or we can turn it into a development property, right? So a good example of that is if there's a property we did, and then I love hearing stories about folks who tell me about these too. There's a property we did in San Diego that we bought for $375 grand. We spent, $600 something thousand in entitlement. So we're into it for about $1 million. It was just a house. and it was zoned that we could build up to 7 units on it. We went and got a zoning change and things like that. It took some work, about a year and a half, and a good amount of money. But now we're selling that thing for $6 million. Right, so we just bought a house. Ideal Target helped us identify that house. Somebody was in distress, and we could then therefore get a better deal. Little did we know we were able to turn it into what it has become. That's the creativity of our team, right? But just knowing where to target first, is helpful. And then in the red, those are development opportunities that we could go get involved in. They've stalled for some reason. The owners have some sort of financial distress, something like that going on. We can go do a deal, and we can upload those to either our fund or to other funds. And if you see that as a holistic view of a neighborhood, we can have a very high impact on how that neighborhood changes over the course of 10 years. And that's all based off of data, that we identify exactly which properties that we should focus on. And then we use our creative investment strategies to, build the community and create value in the neighborhood, and obviously make a profit doing it. I usually start my presentations by saying, let me tell you what we're not, but since I didn't, I will let you guys know that we are definitely capitalists and not, philanthropists or social impact, although we have massive impact in our neighborhoods. But we go into areas definitely looking to make a profit, and that's achieved by focusing and working with the community to build, equitable and inclusive developments. It's a profitable strategy. It's also the right thing to do. So if you're interested in anything related to opportunity zones or data-driven things, I encourage you to do something about it. And if you want to talk to us, check out place.com or idealtarget.ai, and we'll be happy to chat with you more and go over what's going on with you personally in your given situation, and see if we might be able to help you be smarter about your decision making, or invest in some cool projects and opportunity zones. So if anybody has questions.
Excellent, Mark. And maybe one day I'd like to have just another session to do a deep dive into the software that you have, really find some use cases and
yeah,
I think that would
so
be.
if you have a couple minutes, I can tell you some use cases. If the group wants to hear use cases, I can give you a few use
Sure.
cases.
Let's give it. Let's do a 2-minute demo.
Okay. Well, I won't do a 2-minute demo. I'll just tell you some things that have worked. So for realtors, right? So a realtor who uses our data came to us, started out as a successful realtor targeting certain kind. He primarily focuses on working with investors who buy either value add properties or flip properties or rental properties. His clients are investors. So he started buying our list from us. He was reasonably successful. He's a hustler and a go-getter, and he uses it, and he says that his cost of marketing has gone way down. His conversion rate's way up, and he is on one of the lists of the top producing realtors in the country now. An investor client of ours does a whole lot of wholesaling business. They started out working with us in, like 3 different areas. Within 3 months, they added a 4th area that they decided to start working on, that they hadn't had in the plans, and to even start working in, and started using our data to target that data. When they first started working with us, about 90% of their business was wholesaling business, and about 10% of their business was in-house deals. Within a year of working with us, they had raised their own funds, and 70% of their business was their own flips, and only 30% of it was wholesale deals. So essentially what they found is, by using our data and targeting the kind of folks that we could put them in front of, that they would get significantly higher margins, that it didn't make sense to wholesale those deals anymore. Because they could get significantly higher margins doing it themselves. And then on a commercial side, right? So, a landlord, a commercial property developer, a mixed-use property developer would use something like Ideal Target, identify business gaps and, who are the ideal tenants to put in a given area. Is it just a chicken shop, or does Chick-fil-A going to perform better, or is Baja Fresh going to perform better, or is it a Chinese food restaurant? And we can do those kinds of things, and get really intricate on helping commercial or, you know, retail or restaurant or other kinds of larger real estate owners to expand into new markets by, you know, giving them some real deep intelligence about, you know, where it's likely to be successful. So from a developer perspective, right, it's really great to go out to a tenant, say you want to attract a Chick-fil-A, you can go to them with a data-driven analysis of the property that says it's perfect for Chick-fil-A, and they don't even know it. So that's another example. And then of course we use it in our business to, you know, identify, you know, different opportunity zones to focus on, different specific blocks within opportunity zones to focus on. Again, we use it to decide, you know, some of what's needed in a neighborhood, and that informs what we do as far as the curation of our activation sites. You know, we also use it for identifying, you know, zoning overlays. You know, so a good example of that is we can do a search of, you know, like what we did in San Diego. We identified all of the properties that were of a certain criteria, right? They had a, you know, 1,500 square feet or less with a large lot of 7,000 square feet or more that was, you know, street to alley, right? So that means 2 entrances, right? And so those are prime properties for either 1, building additional units, or 2, putting ADUs. And so we just can pull out and identify every single one of those properties in a given area, and then cross-reference that and find out, let's say there's 293 of those. We can pull out the 14 owners that are having trouble financially, and therefore, you know, more likely to be, 1, interested in selling, 2, not be on the market already, and 3, more likely to negotiate, whether that's price, terms, or both. So those are some kind of use cases.
Excellent, excellent.
Marc, so I have a couple questions real quick in the chat. Can I answer those real quick?
I'm starting to get some questions. If people are approaching 1031 exchanges, can they transfer the equity to CoPlace or one of your funds?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's just obviously for each individual situation, I'll just say, you know, always consult your specific, you know, accountant, because ultimately this program is a taxpayer program. So it's based on your own particular situation. Generally, the answer is yes. But with each and every investor we, you know, walk through how to specifically bring that investment into our fund, you know, based off of their current situation. So generally, yes, 1031s can transfer into opportunity zones.
Excellent. And then I have a question. Are your projects primarily in SoCal, San Diego area, or do you also do projects up here in the Bay Area?
So currently we have projects in San Diego, Atlanta, Dallas, and then we're working on identifying stuff up in Northern California. So we're looking at some stuff in Oakland. We've done a small activation project in Oakland, actually, but it was just that was a contract thing that one of our partners did as an architect. But a larger scale co-listing we're looking at in potentially East Oakland. So we just haven't made a decision because realistically, San Diego's our backyard. We have all the relationships with all the necessary people we need there to get things done in the way that we do. And when we go to other areas like Atlanta or Dallas or, you know, Oakland or places like that, we piggyback on the relationships of, you know, someone who has them there already. So typically what that looks like is we partner and or become an equity investor in the project in the other area, but we're going to piggyback on all those relationships. You know, someone's got to have all that stuff in place. Otherwise, what we do isn't going to work, right? So we're very community driven. We can't just come into a place and say, you know, we're just going to plop down and expect that everybody's going to do it, because there's a lot of different moving parts, from philanthropy to the city to economic development to the neighborhood themselves and you know, other developers. And so, you know, it takes somebody who's really got a passion for it and, you know, also has, you know, a good project to work on. So yeah, generally that's the answer.
These are complex projects, and they take a lot of time and a lot of capital. So, but the outcome can be pretty Impressive.
Sure.
And then
Mark?
one more question from a member here. So is your software, is that a subscription? How does the pricing work?
Yeah, so it's typically a subscription and it's based off of, so there's a few different ways. I mean, I'm happy to take the time and tell anybody how it is, or I'll just tell everybody how it is roughly, right? Because each area is a little bit different depending on, you know, volume and prices and things like that of the given area itself. But generally, if it's just data, yeah, there's just a really simple, you know, subscription on a month-to-month basis. We recommend clients who want to test it out, do it for 3 months to test it, because that's how you're going to, you know, really understand whether or not you're, you know, seeing results. You got to test it for some period of time, not just, you know, a wham bam. You got to give it enough touches. We also, you know, provide, you know, appending services. So, you know, if you need phone numbers and you have a dialing team, we can append phone numbers if you can't do that yourself. We get very accurate phone numbers. Generally a subscription for a given county. We usually do it by county or zip code, either one. Usually by county though. Targeting is people who are going to be more likely to sell than not. And if you're looking in just a zip code, you know, there's going to just be a handful of those people just by the nature of the number of people in a given zip code, right? So if you're looking at a whole county, you can really start to get some a large enough data set to see some really massive results in your business. So the typical subscription, you know, for somewhere in California, like probably ranges between, you know, $500 and $1,500 a month or something like that. And we also do, you know, various different kind of data reports. You know, appending of phone numbers is, you know, on a per record basis. And then we have marketing services that are, you know, pretty affordable for things like ringless voicemail, which I strongly believe in because it generates a, you know, an inbound phone call as opposed to an outbound phone call. People give me flack about that all the time. I just say that it needs to be done the right way because we've seen it do quite well for clients and ourselves. Additionally, you know, SMS text and email, and then, you know, we have a really slick capability to do personalized, automated, you know, kind of online digital advertising to folks as well. And personalized, you know, direct mail with all kinds of cool capabilities and stuff like that. And just generally, I'd let people in my opinion, I'll just share this from a marketing perspective to anybody out there who's marketing right now. Do direct mail. I don't know if you've checked your mailbox lately, but it's empty. So if you want to market to somebody who's in distress right now and you want them to open that piece of mail, which is the primary issue with direct mail, right? Is you send them a piece of mail and you have to figure out whether or not they're going to open it. Nobody's getting mail right now. So the likelihood that somebody's going to open a well-positioned piece of mail is pretty high right now. We've been seeing clients see some, you know, pretty good results with direct mail, you know, post-COVID. And in addition, like I said, ringless voicemail is great because it's really affordable. If it's done properly and with the right scripting, you know, you generate an inbound phone call, and conversion rates on inbound phone calls, you know, far surpass that of outbound.
Hey, Mark, we have a question from Facebook from Surum. I think you kind of just answered that with the data you just shared, but she wants to know if your software covers only San Diego or you have other
Oh, no, we're nationwide. No, we're nationwide for the data. Yeah, we just do, our let's just separate the two out, right? So Ideal Target is the predictive analytics and data analysis business. And CoPlace is our investment fund vehicles, right? But we actually do our projects. And we do most of our projects in San Diego and in those other areas I said. But that's just where we invest our money, right? We have clients all around the country as far as Ideal Target is concerned. So we have coverage. I will give the caveat of, you know, some data sets are more limited in certain areas based off of, you know, certain privacy laws in given states or municipalities and things like that. But, you know, we get direct source data. You know, all of the data we have is from direct sources. We have top level relationships with, you know, all the top level data providers. We're not really buying from data brokers. We're buying, you know, directly from the big data houses. We're getting directly, you know, direct access to court records. We're getting direct access to public records and things like that. So there's no delay. We're not going through a chain of brokers and things like that to get the data.
Got it. All right, everybody. Jana, any other questions?
I see a
No,
question
thank you.
in here from earlier about extending beyond 2027. I was just going to say that
Oh, yeah, that was my
2027.
question.
Okay, so Jan, I'll just answer that for you real quick. 2027 is just when the tax bill is due on the original gain. So say you made $1 million in gains in 2020, you invested in opportunity zone. 2027, that 33.33% for a California owner on the 900,000 would be due. Now your investment can stay in longer. A lot, and like what we'll do with our investors then is we will either refinance the property or do an interest-free loan to the investor so that there's no tax consequence. So think of it as a distribution, but that's not necessarily a capital distribution. So the investor doesn't have a tax consequence, but gets capital out to pay that tax bill in 2027. Most opportunity zone funds will be doing that for their investors. And then
Didn't you have to have, I'm sorry, didn't you have to have like a 10-year hold to see a 10-year forgiveness or something, 10%?
Yeah. So it's an interesting thing. You just what you have to do is you have to be in for long. Like it's kind of weird how they figure it out. Like if you're in it for a certain amount of time by 2027, they assume it's 10. So it's like you pay the initial gain based off of the assumption that you're staying in for 10. So there was 5.
So it's still possible.
Yeah. So essentially, here's how it works. So there was 5, and then there was a 10, and I maybe didn't explain that best at the beginning. So if you invested before January 1 of this year, you could have gotten a 15% step up in basis. Now you're maxed out at 10. So as long as you're in for 5 years or what it is by 2027, you're getting that 10% step up in basis. So you're not going to get nobody can get the 15% anymore because
That's what I was
ended at
asking.
the beginning
It was
of
the
the year.
15
Yeah,
that
but
I
you
was
can still
asking
get
about.
the,
So that's
still
gone.
get the 10. Yeah, you can
Got
still
it.
get the 10%, and you still get the no taxes on the profit. And then the program itself is supposedly to sunset in 2047. The highest likelihood for that is that is not going to be the case, simply because the lobbyists for, the big investment firms out there, like who's going to be able to tell someone like BlackRock that they have to sell all of their assets that are invested in opportunity zones in 2047? Like if it's not the right time, they're not going to sell it. So the likelihood that this program is just going to go on in perpetuity as far as the sunset of when you have to sell your assets, like I don't think that they're going to put anything on it. Right now it's, we've got 27 years until the program technically sunsets.
Excellent.
Great, thank you.
Excellent. All right, folks. If you have no other questions, then so thank you, Mark. Thank you, Dana. Very helpful, very educational. Hopefully our members got a lot out of this. So truly grateful for your time. And I'm sure we'll have you both back here again. But I think I'm sure you'll get a lot of questions about the software and opportunity zones and all that. So, and then of course, Dana, a lot of property management questions. So look out for those. But thank you. Thank you both. Thanks, Yana. If some of you want to stick around, we can network a little bit. I can actually, I do have a demo of some software that I've been developing. I can give you a quick demo, but you don't have to stay, but I'm looking for some alpha testers, beta testers for my software. So if you got nothing better to do, then stick around and we'll do that. So real quick, so this is our new website. It's called Better Capital. And what it does is it tracks your real estate assets. So you have all your real estate assets in one place. So what I'm going to do is I will log into it, and let me see here. Yana, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Just making sure. All right, so what I'll do is I'll use my demo account. And here we are. This is where you can come in and you can track all your assets as far as like what did you pay for it, what's your lease, what's your monthly lease, when is it due, what's your deposit, what are your operating expenses, what all the expenses related to your property, when did you buy it, what was your purchase price, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can actually go in and look at all your historical transactions and see how they did. And then if you have any attachments, you can have all your attachments in one place. So your insurance, your leases, your tax bill, your HOA if you have one, anything related to that property can be stored on the cloud in one place. All your contacts can be in this area. You can communicate with your contacts, let's say your property manager, your insurance agent, your lender, all of that can be in one place. But it also gives you an analysis of how your property did. So if you have used Schwab or E-Trade to track all your real estate assets, I'm sorry, your stock portfolio, you can see in real time how your portfolio is doing. Well, what we've done is we have built something like that for your real estate assets. But I'll just give you a quick demo of how you can, add a new asset. And then it's still in alpha mode. So if you run into issues, please do reach out to me and I'll show you how to use it. But yeah, we're looking for some beta testers. So I'm going to go to East one. I think it's 13001. Yeah, here we go. This is my test property. I'm going to go here and I'm going to go in here. I'm going to say it's a rental. But you can track your syndications, your notes, your fix and flips, if you got a property that's just you're selling one of your properties, you can put it up here. There's no cost to it. And we'll dive into that later, but but maybe you're tracking your primary residence. But in this case, let's say it's a rental. And then I'll just say it's me. I'm going to say for now it's self-managed, but we do have Hemlane in here where we do accept data from Hemlane. We'll dive into that later, but for now, just to keep things simple, I'm over here. So I want to say the lease is $950. It's monthly. It's due on the 1st of every month, and it ends in 2021 on, let's say, June 1st. This is a reminder. So if you turn it on, it'll let you know that every month you'll get a little reminder over here. And we've got a calendar. I'll show you that later. And the deposit was $1,500, and it was paid on June. Let's say it was paid on June 2019. Let's say just to keep the system simple. Operating expenses. Let's say the taxes were $900. Some counties have two taxes payments. In some other counties, it's only once. Let's just keep it simple and say it's once. And we'll say it was due in January of 2020 on the 11th. Insurance was $650, and it was due on, let's say, February 8th. Mortgage is $343. You can also calculate your mortgage here. So let's say it was $65,000. Interest rate was 4.25, 30-year fixed. And so yeah, close enough. And let's say the property management was $88. So that's that. I come into asset details. When did I buy it? Let's say I bought it in 2016. Let's say I bought it in, let's make it March. Okay. Purchase price was 81,000. Market doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Market rent is 950. Some of this is not important. After repair value was 100,000. Let's say. Okay. If there was a rehab, let's in this case, I did actually. My purchase was 61,000, and my rehab was 20. Okay. Update. All right, so now I got that. If I got pictures, I can add pictures of the property. So I'm gonna go to, let's say let's see, Q&A. I'm gonna go here, some sample pictures. Let's say, let's pick these 3. And I'm gonna say upload. So I can add pictures of my properties. We're actually adding a maintenance module as well. So you know when you change the roof, when did you install the appliances, where are the warranties on the appliances, and so on and so forth. Your HVAC, when was the filter changed? We're gonna have a module for that as well. And then attachments, you can email an attachment to this property. So this is a unique email just for this specific property. Or you can manually add an attachment. So I'll just go here and I'm gonna say, you know what, I'm gonna add this and this as an attachment. You can attach PDFs, Excel, whatever you want, Word documents, text, doesn't matter. Okay, I can also add a tag to this. I can say this is my 2017 tax bill. Okay, and then this one I can say is my 2019 tax Jackson County. Okay, so I can save the tags. So if you do a search, so for example, if I do a search on Jackson, okay, so it's going to only find Jackson. If I say 2017, it's only going to find 2017. So anyway, so there's that. And then what I'm going to show you is how to import historical data, like how to import how this property performed over, let's say, since I purchased it, provided I have that data available. And I'll dive into how to create that data. It doesn't have to be, if you got the data, great. If not, don't worry about it. We provide a template. So if you do need to look at how to import this data, we have a template. And here we go. So now it imported all my data. I can now go to overview and I can say, okay, how did my property perform this year? How did my property perform last year? You know, so if you had expenses, you had additional income, let's say from laundry or whatever, a laundromat on your facility or whatever your transactions are, all that data will reflect now in a graphical manner, and you can have reminders. So all, you know, if you need to put in a reminder saying, you know, let's say on the 20th. So today is the 9th. Let's say on the 13th, you know, call handyman. Replace screen door. Okay. One time call Joe. Okay, so I can put that. And if I'm done with it, for example, this one, if I'm done with it, I can mark it as completed and so on, right? So all your reminders are in one place. So basically, this is called tracking. We also have a training, you know, all my meetups, and Yana and I are working on, if you know any great real estate teachers, you know, we got Dana, we got Marc. If anybody wants to be a real estate instructor, you know, where you want to share knowledge about something very specific that you're very passionate about, that you're very good at, then come talk to us. We'll create a course around that. And then services, you know, these are things like if you need CPAs, attorneys, architects, lenders, you know, Marc's software, Dana's software, Dana system, all of the relevant real estate service providers are going to be here. And then over here, these are opportunities where if you want to sell something, you can come in and sell it here. Then we work, you can do a for sale by owner, or we can recommend an agent that'll work with you. So we want to incorporate, we're not an iBuyer. We want to work, real estate is not a simple transaction. We do believe that in many cases, you should work with a licensed agent. Some cases you don't. If you got plenty of experience, you can buy from wholesalers and off market and all that. But many times you do want to work with an agent. So we will work, if you're an agent, talk to us. We want to incorporate you into the sale. But this is what I've been working on in my spare time with a friend of mine for about a year. We're in what's called an alpha mode. We're looking for people to test the site, you know, just bang away on it, but would love to get your feedback. It's bettercapital.us. If you got a Gmail account, you can log in with your Gmail account. Everything is secure. We're working also on another integration with your bank, so you don't have to do any double entry. We talk to property management systems. We talk to Excel. We talk to CSV. We talk to you know, any system that you can think of. Let us know. We'll try to build that integration. So, Yana, you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, so as Bobby mentioned, we're looking for users to try this out. There's actually no cost, so you can just log right in, create a user profile. You can upload rentals if you have them. You can also upload your personal property if you just want to see how the software works. And if you guys are service providers, like he mentioned, if you're an appraiser or you sell insurance and you like to put a business card on the website, please do that as well and reach out to us for that.
Absolutely. And then lastly, one last point, please, you know, we have a meetup group and we have our Facebook group. So if you are online and you want to help contribute useful, but no spam, but, you know, just useful content, education, then please do join our Facebook group. This is our Facebook group. And Yana and I will try to keep you entertained, but we really would love your feedback. Also, this is our, let me see, this is our meetup group. So this is our main meetup group. So, you know, join us there as well. But look, we love your feedback, whatever, good, bad, ugly, give it to us. And we want to hear from you. So thank you for being patient and listening to us, and hope to see you on the 23rd. Thanks, Yana.
Thank you. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.